There are moments in life when everything changes in a single breath, when the world you knew disappears and all that remains is the raw truth of survival. This is a story about one of those moments, a story about loyalty that defies logic, about love that transcends species, about a bond so powerful it rewrites what we think we know about the souls that walk beside us. This is the story of Max and the man who thought he had lost everything. The winter of 2019 arrived in the mountains of Colorado with a fury that no one expected. James Mitchell was a man who had built his life on solitude. 53 years old, weathered by time and hardship, he had retreated to a cabin deep in the Rockies after losing his wife to cancer 3 years prior. The grief had hollowed him out, left him a shell of who he once was. He stopped answering calls from his daughter. He stopped caring about tomorrow. The cabin became his prison and his sanctuary, a place where he could disappear from a world that had taken everything he loved. But he was not entirely alone. 2 years before, on one of his rare trips into town, he had found a puppy abandoned behind a gas station, skinny, shivering, with eyes that held a wisdom beyond his weeks. James had never been a dog person. He told himself he was just doing the right thing, that he would drop the pup at a shelter. But something happened on that drive home. The puppy had crawled into his lap, pressed his tiny head against James's chest, and fallen asleep. And for the first time in months, James felt something other than emptiness. He named him Max. Max grew into a magnificent German shepherd, all muscle and intelligence and unwavering devotion. He followed James everywhere. When James chopped wood, Max sat watching, alert. When James sat on the porch at sunset, Max lay at his feet. When James woke screaming from nightmares about his wife's final days, Max was there, pressing his weight against James's chest until the panic subsided. Max did not judge. Max did not ask questions. Max simply loved with a purity that humans spend lifetimes trying to understand. On the morning of December 8th, the sky held a strange quality, too still, too gray. James had lived in these mountains long enough to recognize the signs. A storm was coming. Not just any storm. The weather radio crackled with warnings about a blizzard that could drop 4 feet of snow, about wind chills that could kill in minutes. James secured the cabin, brought in extra firewood, checked his supplies. Max paced nervously by the door, whining softly, his instincts screaming that something was wrong. The storm hit at noon like the wrath of something ancient and merciless. The wind did not howl. It screamed. Snow came sideways, so thick James could not see 5 feet beyond his windows. The temperature plummeted to 20 below zero. The power died within hours. James lit the fireplace, rationed his food, and settled in to wait it out. Max curled beside him, sharing warmth, his presence a comfort in the violence outside. By the third day, the storm had not relented. It had only grown worse. James's supplies were running low. The cold had seeped into the cabin's bones, turning his breath to fog even near the fire. But it was the pain in his chest that terrified him most. It started as pressure, a tightness that made breathing difficult. Then came the shooting pain down his left arm. James had seen enough medical shows, had watched his father die of a heart attack when he was 16. He knew what was happening. And he knew, trapped in this cabin with no power, no phone signal, miles from the nearest neighbor, that he was likely going to die. He collapsed near the fireplace, clutching his chest, his vision swimming. Max was on him instantly, whining, licking his face, pawing at his shoulder. James tried to speak, but the pain stole his words. His last conscious thought was a prayer, not for himself, but for Max. That someone would find him, that he would not starve or freeze, that this loyal soul would not die because of James's choice to isolate himself from the world. James did not know how long he was unconscious, hours, maybe a day. When awareness began to return, it came in fragments: warmth, pressure, a rhythmic sound. His eyelids were so heavy, but he forced them open. The cabin was dark except for dying embers in the fireplace. And there was Max, lying fully across James's chest and torso, his body a blanket of living warmth. But it was more than that. Max was not just lying there. Every few seconds he would press down with his front paws against James's chest, then release. Press and release. Press and release. Crude, instinctive, but unmistakable. The dog was performing chest compressions. Tears froze on James's cheeks. He tried to speak, managed only a whisper. Good boy, Max." The dog's ears perked up. He licked James's face frantically, whining with what could only be described as relief, then resumed his position, maintaining the warmth, continuing the compressions whenever James's breathing became too shallow. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, a dog refused to let his human die. James drifted in and out of consciousness. Each time he woke, Max was there. The dog barely moved except to press more wood toward the fire's edge with his snout, trying to keep the flames alive. He did not eat the food James had left accessible. He did not sleep. He simply kept vigil, his entire being focused on one purpose: keeping James alive. On what James later learned was the fifth day, the storm finally broke. The wind died. The snow stopped. And in the eerie silence that followed, Max did something he had never done. He left James's side. James, barely conscious, watched through half-closed eyes as Max went to the door and began to bark. Not the playful bark of a happy dog, not the warning bark of a protector. This was something primal, desperate, a sound that carried across the frozen wilderness, a sound that said, "Help us." Max barked for hours. His throat must have been raw, but he did not stop. And then, like a miracle, there was a sound, an engine, snowmobiles. Max's barking intensified, became frenzied, voices outside, pounding on the door. "Anyone in there? We are search and rescue." Max threw himself against the door, scratching, crying. The door burst open and two figures in heavy gear stumbled in, their headlamps cutting through the darkness. They found James barely alive, hypothermic, his heart rhythm dangerously irregular. They found Max standing over him, shaking with exhaustion, his eyes wild but refusing to move until the rescuers approached slowly, speaking softly, convincing him they were there to help. The helicopter could not land in the deep snow. They stabilized James as best they could, loaded him onto a sled, and began the treacherous journey down the mountain. Max refused to be left behind. He ran alongside the snowmobile, pulling James mile after mile through chest-deep snow, his paws bleeding, his body pushed beyond any reasonable limit. When they finally reached the evacuation point, when the helicopter blades began to turn, Max tried to climb in with James. The paramedics had to physically restrain him as they lifted off, and the last thing James saw before losing consciousness again was Max below, watching the helicopter rise, still barking, still fighting to stay with him. James woke in a hospital in Denver 4 days later. The doctors told him he had had a massive heart attack, that the damage to his heart was severe, that by all rights he should be dead. They could not explain how he had survived so long without proper medical care, in sub-zero temperatures, with his heart in crisis. James tried to tell them about Max, about the compressions, about the warmth, but they smiled politely, dismissively. "Shock does strange things to memory," they said. "Dogs cannot understand CPR. You are confused. You are lucky." But James knew what he had experienced, and he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He needed to find Max. The rescue team had taken Max to an animal shelter in the nearest town. When James was finally strong enough to leave the hospital, his daughter drove him there. She had flown in from Boston the moment she heard. This daughter he had shut out of his life in his grief. She cried when she saw him. She held his hand in the car and said she had thought she had lost him too, that she could not lose both parents, that she needed him to come home with her, to please stop living like a ghost. The shelter was small, underfunded, run by volunteers with too many animals and not enough resources. The woman at the desk recognized James from the news coverage. The story had spread. Man survives blizzard, heart attack, thanks to loyal dog. She smiled, but it was a sad smile, and James felt his own heart clench. "Where is he?" James asked. "Where is Max?" The woman hesitated. "Mr. Mitchell, Max he is not doing well. The exposure, the exertion, the stress. He pushed his body beyond its limits. We have had the vet see him twice. She said if he was a human, you would say he had given everything he had and then some. His paws are badly frostbitten. He has lost weight. He has not eaten properly since he got here. Mostly he just waits, stares at the door." They led James to the back, to a quiet room away from the main kennels, and there, on a blanket in the corner, lay Max. He looked so different, thinner, his coat dull, his eyes tired. But the moment James stepped into that room, everything changed. Max's head lifted, his ears perked, and then he was up, moving faster than should have been possible for a dog in his condition, and he was on James. Paws on his shoulders, whining and crying and licking his face, his entire body shaking with emotion so raw it filled the room. James dropped to his knees, wrapped his arms around Max and sobbed. Deep, heaving sobs that came from a place he had kept locked since his wife died. "You saved me," he whispered into Max's fur. "You saved me, boy. You brought me back." His daughter stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. She had never seen her father like this, had not seen him cry at her mother's funeral, had not seen him show any emotion in 3 years except hollowness. But here he was, broken open by the love of a dog who had refused to let him go. The vet came in, a young woman with kind eyes. She explained Max's condition carefully. The frostbite on his paws would heal, but he would likely have chronic pain. The weight loss was concerning. But more than the physical, it was the emotional trauma. Dogs who go through what Max went through, she said softly, they can develop severe separation anxiety, PTSD, if you will. He will need stability, routine, and most of all, he will need you. Not just for a few days. He will need to know you are not leaving him again. James looked up at her, then at his daughter, then back at Max. "I am not going anywhere," he said. "Not anymore." The drive back to Boston was long. Max sat in the back seat, his head resting on James's lap, as if afraid that if he broke contact, James would disappear. They stopped at hotels that allowed dogs, even though Max would not let James out of his sight. When James showered, Max lay outside the bathroom door. When James slept, Max pressed against the bed, watching. James's daughter lived in a brownstone with a small yard. She had set up a room for her father, filled with photos of him and her mother, with familiar items from his cabin. She had set up a bed for Max too, expensive and orthopedic, and completely ignored, because Max slept on the floor beside James's bed every single night. The first few weeks were an adjustment. James had doctor's appointments, medications, strict orders to rest and reduce stress. His daughter worked from home, cooking meals he actually had to eat, forcing him to talk, gently pulling him back into the world of the living. And Max was there through all of it. A constant presence, a living reminder of why James had to keep going. The nightmares changed. James still dreamed of his wife sometimes, still woke with tears on his face. But now there were other dreams too. Dreams of the storm, of the cold, of dying alone. And every time he woke from those dreams, Max was there. Not just physically present, but awake, alert, as if he had been waiting for this exact moment. He would climb onto the bed, carefully because of his paws, and press his weight against James until the fear subsided. Slowly, something began to happen. James started to heal, not just his heart, though the medication and rest were helping with that. He began to heal in ways that medicine could not touch. He started talking to his daughter about her mother, sharing memories instead of hiding from them. He started going on short walks with Max, discovering the neighborhood, meeting people. He started to remember what it felt like to be part of the world instead of apart from it. One evening, about 6 weeks after leaving the hospital, James was sitting in the small backyard watching Max sniff around the garden. His daughter came out with 2 cups of tea, sat beside him. "Dad," she said quietly, "I've been thinking. I know you miss the mountains. I know you feel displaced here." James looked at his hands. "I was dying up there, honey, not just during the storm, before. I had given up. I was just waiting to stop existing." "I know," she said, "but you are different now. You are here, really here. And I think maybe there is a middle ground. You do not have to be alone in the wilderness, but you do not have to be in the city either." Over the next few months, they found a compromise. A small house in the mountains of Vermont, close enough to civilization that James had neighbors, had access to medical care, had community, but quiet enough, wild enough, that he could breathe. His daughter visited monthly. James started volunteering at a local search and rescue organization, training younger dogs, sharing Max's story. Max, for his part, seemed to settle into this new life. His paws healed, though he walked with a slight limp. His weight returned, and while he never lost the vigilance, the need to know where James was at all times, he began to play again. To run. To be a dog, and not just a guardian. The story could end there, a happy ending of sorts. Man and dog, saved by each other, living out their days in peace. But life is more complex than that, and love is more profound. 3 years after the blizzard, James received a call. A hiker was missing in the Vermont wilderness. Elderly man, late 70s, wandered from a trail 2 days ago, weather turning. Search and rescue was mobilizing. They knew James and Max. They knew what they had been through. They were not asking James to go out. They knew his heart condition made that impossible. But could Max help? Could he track? James looked at Max, now 7 years old, still strong, but not the young dog he had once been. Max looked back, and James saw it. That same intelligence, that same purpose. "You want to help, do you not, boy?" Max's tail wagged once. They went to the staging area. The lead coordinator explained the situation carefully. Max would go with a handler, a young woman named Sarah, who specialized in canine search and rescue. James would stay at base camp monitoring. James knelt in front of Max, held his face gently. "Find him, Max, like you found me." They gave Max an article of clothing belonging to the missing man. Max sniffed once, twice, and then his entire demeanor changed. He became focused, purposeful. Sarah clipped the lead, and they set out. James watched until they disappeared into the trees, his heart clenching with pride and fear in equal measure. 6 hours passed. Radio chatter. They had picked up a trail. They were heading into rough terrain. More time. The sun was setting, temperature dropping, then silence that stretched too long. Finally, the radio crackled. Sarah's voice, breathless. "We found him. Max found him. He is alive. Hypothermic but alive. We need medical evacuation to our location." James felt his knees go weak. Max had done it. He had saved another life. When Max returned to base camp 3 hours later, he was exhausted, limping more than usual, but his eyes were bright. He went straight to James, who wrapped his arms around him and whispered, "You are a hero. You understand that? You are a hero." The local news picked up the story. Dog who survived blizzard saved his owner, now saves lost hiker. Max became something of a local celebrity, but more than that, he became a symbol. Schools invited James to speak, to bring Max, to talk about loyalty and courage and the bonds that defy explanation. James, who had once hidden from the world, found himself standing in front of auditoriums full of children, with Max sitting calmly beside him, telling their story. He talked about grief, about how it can swallow you whole if you let it, about how he had chosen isolation, thinking it was easier than facing a world without his wife, about how Max had given him a reason to keep breathing, even when he did not want to, about how Max had literally kept his heart beating when it wanted to give up, and about how, in saving James, Max had taught him something crucial, that love does not end when someone dies. It transforms. It finds new expressions. It continues. The children would ask questions. Always someone would ask, "How did Max know to do chest compressions?" And James would smile and say, "I do not know. Maybe he had watched me watching television, some medical show. Maybe it was pure instinct. Maybe it was something deeper than either of those things. Maybe it was love acting through him in whatever way it could. I stopped trying to explain it scientifically. Some things exist beyond science. Some connections exist beyond what we can measure or quantify." Max lived to be 13 years old. Good years, full years. He was there when James's daughter got married, standing in as unofficial ring bearer, making everyone laugh. He was there when James's first grandchild was born, gentle and protective with the infant. He was there through James's next health scare, a minor stroke that left him temporarily weak, but determined to recover for Max's sake. In the spring of his 13th year, Max began to slow down more noticeably. The veterinarian was kind but honest. Max's time was approaching. His heart was wearing out. The same heart that had kept vigil over James through that terrible storm was getting tired. James made a decision. No heroic measures. No prolonging Max's suffering. When the time came, he would be there, holding Max, making sure Max was not afraid. The day arrived on a warm May morning. Max could not stand anymore. His breathing was labored. James carried him to his favorite spot on the porch, where they had watched countless sunsets together. The vet came to the house, respecting the dignity of this moment. James's daughter was there, holding her father's hand. James cradled Max's head in his lap, stroking his ears the way Max had always loved. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for saving me. Thank you for showing me how to live again. Thank you for being the best friend I ever had. It is okay to rest now, boy. You have earned it. You have earned all the rest in the world." Max looked up at James with those deep, knowing eyes. His tail moved once, a final wag. And as the vet administered the injection that would let him slip away peacefully, Max kept his gaze locked on James's face, not with fear, with trust, with love. With the same devotion he had shown every day of their life together. When it was over, when Max took his last breath, James did not move for a long time. He sat there holding his friend, feeling the weight of him, memorizing it. His daughter cried beside him, and James, this man who had been broken and remade, who had learned about survival and purpose and unconditional love from a dog, leaned down and pressed his forehead against Max's and said simply, "Until we meet again." They buried Max on the property, under an oak tree where he had loved to lie in the shade. James carved a headstone himself, simple but perfect. It read, "Max." He kept the faith. He saved a life. He taught a man how to love again. The months after Max's death were hard. The house felt empty in a way it had not since the early days of grief after James's wife died. But this was different. This grief was clean, if grief can be called that. James missed Max terribly, but he was not hollow. Max had filled something in him that remained filled. The capacity to love, to connect, to keep going, even when things hurt. James continued his work with search and rescue, training young dogs, honoring Max's legacy. He spent time with his daughter and grandson. He wrote a book about his experience, donating the proceeds to animal rescue organizations. He lived. On the 5-year anniversary of that blizzard, of the day Max had refused to let him die, James returned to Colorado. To the cabin. It had been maintained by the property owner, unchanged. James sat on the porch where he had once sat with Max, and he thought about the journey, from despair to purpose, from isolation to connection, from death to life. He thought about how we do not choose the moments that define us. We do not choose when we will be broken or how we will be saved, but we can choose what we do with those moments. We can choose to honor the gifts we are given, even when they come in forms we do not expect. And he thought about Max, about a puppy found abandoned behind a gas station who grew into a dog that would defy every natural instinct to keep one human alive through impossible circumstances. About loyalty so pure, it became something sacred. About love that asked for nothing and gave everything. As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, James felt a presence he could not explain. Not supernatural, not ghostly, just a feeling of peace, of completion, of gratitude so profound it felt like prayer. He spoke out loud, his voice carrying into the wilderness. "You taught me that love is the only thing that really matters, Max. That it is the only thing that survives everything else. The only thing that can bring someone back from the edge. I hope I made you proud. I hope you knew how much you meant to me. I hope wherever you are now, you are running free, no pain, just joy. And I hope you know that you did not just save my life that winter. You saved my soul." The wind moved through the pine trees, creating a sound almost like breathing. And James, this man who had lost everything and found himself through the love of a dog, smiled through his tears, because he knew now what he had not known all those years ago in his darkest moment, that we are never truly alone, that love finds us even when we do not seek it, that sometimes salvation comes on 4 paws and with a wagging tail and with a heart too big for the body that contains it, that some bonds are unbreakable, not by death, not by time, not by anything this world can throw at them, and that we are here to learn from each other, all of us, human and animal, teacher and student, saved and savior. Because in the end, those roles are interchangeable. We all save each other, if we are brave enough to love without holding back. This is what Max taught James. This is what James carried with him for the rest of his life, and when his own time came, years later, surrounded by family who loved him, James's last thought was a simple one, a memory of a cold winter night, of a warm body pressing against his chest, of paws maintaining rhythm, of brown eyes that refused to give up, and of a love that proved stronger than death itself. Some say dogs do not have souls, that they are somehow less than human in their consciousness, their capacity for emotion, their understanding of sacrifice. Anyone who says this has never been saved by one. Anyone who says this has never looked into the eyes of a creature who chooses to love you despite having every reason not to, who gives everything, asks for nothing, and redefines what it means to be loyal. Max was more than a dog. He was a teacher, a healer, a savior. A friend who never wavered, never judged, never abandoned. And in being all those things, he was exactly what every dog is, if we are wise enough to pay attention. A reminder that we are capable of more than we think, that we can love more deeply than we imagine, that we can survive what seems unsurvivable, that we are never as alone as we feel, and that sometimes the thing that saves us comes in the form we least expect, asking only to be loved in return. This is the story of Max and James, a story of survival, of loyalty, of love that defied death. But really, it is everyone's story. It is the story of what happens when we open ourselves to connection, when we let ourselves be vulnerable, when we allow another soul, no matter the species, to matter to us completely. It is a story about coming back from the edge, about finding purpose in the darkest places, about letting love in, even when we think we have nothing left to give. It is a story that asks us to look at the creatures who share our lives and see them not as pets or possessions, but as the miracles they are, as the teachers they are, as the saviors they are, because every single one of them carries within them the same capacity that Max had, the capacity to love without condition, to give without counting the cost, to be present without judgment, to save us in ways big and small every single day. We just have to be willing to see it, to honor it, to love them back with even a fraction of the purity they offer us. This is Max's gift to the world, not just saving one man on one mountain during one storm, but showing all of us what is possible when love is given permission to be everything it can be. Showing us that we are worth saving, that we are worth fighting for, that we matter even when we think we do not. And reminding us that in our darkest hours, when we think we are alone, when we think we cannot go on, there is often someone beside us, refusing to give up, keeping the faith, keeping our hearts beating, keeping us alive, sometimes on four paws, sometimes covered in fur, always with a heart that knows something we have forgotten, that love is everything, that love is enough, that love is the only thing that truly survives, and that we are here to give it, receive it, and be transformed by it. This is what Max knew from the moment he pressed his tiny puppy head against James's chest all those years ago. This is what he lived. This is what he died knowing. And this is what remains, long after the storm has passed, long after the story has been told, long after the last breath has been taken. Love remains, always, forever, unbreakable, just like Max, just like the bond. Just like the truth that some connections transcend everything we think we understand about life and death and the space between them. This is that truth. This is that story. This is that love. And it was an honor to witness it, to share it, to be reminded by it that we are all capable of being more than we think we are. If only we choose to be, if only we open our hearts, if only we let ourselves love and be loved, the way Max loved James, completely, unconditionally, forever.